Coast Local Planning Panel. Who would have thought we'd have our first meeting electronically, but thanks to COVID-19, here we are. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the different lands we're meeting on today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I have to tell you that the Aboriginal land I'm looking at today looks pretty spectacular. I've got a few housekeeping things to start with. Firstly, to remind panel members, council staff and members of the public that this meeting is being recorded and webcast. So, you know, bear in mind that is happening when you choose your remarks. All of the panel's public meetings are required to have audio recordings made and uploaded to council's website. And the panel's decisions from this meeting and audio recording will be available on council's website ordinarily within 7 days from this meeting. Can I ask everybody to turn their electronic devices to silent and make sure they're free from any interruptions? Otherwise, it could be a bit challenging to have this meeting, particularly electronically. There is to be no other recording or filming of the meeting. Any such recording may only occur with the prior permission of the panel, and nobody has asked and no permission has been given. Today's meeting is to consider the determination of development applications for a proposed telecommunications tower at 103 Victoria Street, East Gosford. That's development application 57859/2020. And a second application for the use of 2 shipping containers for storage at 261W Cresthaven Avenue, Batteau Bay, also known as Pat Morley Oval. That one is development application 405/2020. The panel members today are myself, Donna Reigate, as the chair, Greg Flynn, who is one of the expert or professional members. The other expert or professional member is Stephen Leafley, and we also have Tony Tuxworth with us as the nominated community panel member. We haven't received any apologies that I'm aware of, so that's a nil return. In terms of declarations of interest, everybody has put in their forms. Tony, your form's been received? Can't hear you.
I sent it to the panel email address.
Okay. And was there anything that you particularly wanted us to be aware of?
No, I didn't have any interest in any of those matters.
Okay. I note that one panel member did indicate that they received their mobile telephone service through Telstra, and that was probably the only interest declared. I'm also a customer of Telstra, but I think that's a reasonably remote linkage for today's proceedings.
Just for the minutes, Donna, I can confirm that we've received all of the notice of disclosures from all the panel members, including yourself.
Thank you very much. Okay. I remind everybody that the Code of Conduct for panel members requires that conflicts of interest must be declared at the earliest opportunity. Does any member of the panel have a declaration of interest that has not previously been made right up until this minute?
No.
Not me.
No.
No.
Okay. Thank you. The panel has undertaken site visits and been provided with assessment reports provided by council staff. Council staff have also briefed the panel on the key issues that the applications raise. Today, we have one person who has registered to address the panel on the proposed telecommunications tower at 103 Victoria Street, East Gosford, and that is Mr. Michael Bell. Welcome, Michael, and congratulations on being the very first member of the public to register to speak to the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. We'll hear from Michael, then we will hear from the applicant's representatives or who might like to address any issues raised. Our usual practice is to allow individual members of the public 3 minutes to speak on a matter. That time could be extended with the panel's agreement. Once members of the public have spoken, the applicant is given a maximum speaking time of 15 minutes to respond, should they so wish. I remind everybody that the panel has been provided with copies of all the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the DA, so no need to repeat all the points made in those. I also ask everybody to ensure that every speaker is heard in silence while they're addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect be observed throughout the meeting. There isn't to be any personal criticism directed at any speaker or council staff. That would be contrary to the panel's code of conduct and won't be accepted. It also doesn't add anything to the process of considering the matters at hand. Panel members might ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what's being said. And after hearing from speakers, the panel may ask questions of council officers to clarify any matters raised. Okay, so in terms of how this goes, after hearing from the speakers, the panel will adjourn the meeting to confer. If we were meeting in person, we might then reconvene the meeting to hand down our decision verbally to anybody who's there. But in these pandemic times, instead, we're going to seek to have the panel's decision up on council's website as soon as possible. If the panel requires more information to make a decision, the matter might be deferred, either for a further public meeting or to be dealt with electronically. So after deliberation, the panel will decide either to make a decision, or if it needs more information, to defer. I guess that's it for all of the formalities. You've got the agenda item before you, procedural items. I've effectively dealt with procedural item 1.1, disclosures of interest, in the introductory remarks, but does anybody have anything that's just occurred to them that they feel they need to add on there?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, let's move on to the planning reports and item 2.1, which is the proposed telecommunications tower at 103 Victoria Street, East Gosford. And I would like to ask Mr. Bell to address the panel.
Good afternoon, thank you very much. Just for the record there, I'm actually the Senior Branch Manager of the Bendigo Bank that sits next door to this proposed tower, and I'm speaking on behalf of numerous businesses and community here in East Gosford. Obviously, we were made aware of this. Luckily, we made aware of this on a social media page, and subsequently, we did get a letter from our landlord a couple of weeks later. The overriding feeling here is that that this is completely the wrong spot. For one, my staff, myself, you've got the numerous business owners here will be sitting under this tower up to 10 hours a day. The residents at the back, which I believe you would have seen the other day, are there. They're a bit elderly. They're not always out. They will be sitting under it. I see no mention anywhere in the paperwork I've received here of ingress and egress of Gumtree Lane. That's quite a busy little thoroughfare, certainly with deliveries. It's a bit of a rat run, and there are cars and people walking through there all day. One of the other concerns is there was no consultation whatsoever in regards to this. I made representation to the local members, federal, state, and did receive and spoke to a fellow in Canberra from Telstra, the regional experience manager, under email of 6th of February, who basically told me we have a DA submitted for council for 4G base station. The project is only acquisition funded. We have no funding for construction, etc. Obviously, 4G is not what it is. We knew that from the start. We always believed you wouldn't be putting up a tower with old technology. One of the other concerns, we already have a tower here, we know that. And what's the implications of two towers where my staff sit at the back of the branch here will be no more than 5 metres from where this construction is to be, and particularly around the base station and not the tower as such. What are the implications of that in regards to, you know, electrical? I did see a little bit of a mention, but nothing in that you know, eases my mind. Secondly, with the 2 towers, what are the impact of 2 mobile phone towers within such close proximity? The first tower was bad enough, but to have a second tower. I know the school across the road has never been consulted. Cheryl, the principal there, was happy for me to speak on her behalf as well. And they've also got some concerns about how close everything is with no consultation. Also, I do realise that I don't know if the planning panel were up on the, I think the last council, they declined the Optus Tower at Allen Davidson Oval at Wyoming. Again, no consultation, and that was felt that it was too close to residents. So the fact that we're here all day, every day, some businesses here will be 6 days a week. The businesses, unfortunately, they're in 103 that are tenants of the owner who's looking for this approval. You know, we're not as aware of what was going on. You know, it's just it has been a bit of a lot of a concern here at East Gosford. So I hope that you know, I've read some of this stuff. I just, a lot of it doesn't make sense around the antennas will face away from residential areas, 4.1.4, minimising exposure. But that only means we're sitting under it in a business sense all day, every day. So no one can give me any data about that. The fact sheet provided by Telstra was very, very limited. It says they've tested it at a school, Cafe Street. There's no reference as to how old that information is. You know, I know that we've got to move with technology, but I'm sure there's better spots than having, you know, people having to sit under this all day, every day, which is really a concern. And as I said, we've had nothing to tell us otherwise.
Okay.
I think that's my 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell. I appreciate it.
That is quite okay.
Now we're, I guess, ready to hear, unless any members of the panel have a question for Mr. Bell. And I'm taking silence as a no. We're ready to hear from the representatives of the applicant, who I understand are present.
Hello. Yes. My name is Mark Kavanagh. I work for Oricon, who have submitted the application on behalf of Telstra. So I suppose a couple of things to Mr. Bell's points. I'll just raise them first, and then I can address any other questions. So I think the main question Mr. Bell raised was in relation to EME. So there is ARPANSA are the Australian authority, the Australian government authority that is charged with ensuring the safety of the community with regards to electromagnetic energy. So the application was supported with an EME report. The EME report I'm just looking at the moment. So the maximum EME levels calculated for the proposed facility is 5.21%. Now, that 5.21%, 100% is still considered safe. So in fact, with the technologies on this facility, it's operating at about 1/20th of what ARPANSA has advised, which is the safe. That is the safe level. So it is well below. The level of safety provided to us by the Australian government and their authority. So I should point out that is actually calculated at 100% power 100% of the time. In practice, these things don't operate at 100% power 100% of the time. So in practice, it will actually be a lot less than that. However, with precautionary principles built into it as well, we always calculate the absolute maximum this could be. So it is very much within the EME levels, which are all based on scientific evidence, and that's international scientific evidence as well. So that is my response with regards to EME. With regards to the cumulative impacts of the VHA, I think it's Vodafone that's on the adjoining building. I believe that the cumulative impacts have already been considered with this EME report. So I believe it is for both VHA and the Telstra installation. So that's with regards to the cumulative impacts on VHA. With regards to traffic, so this is an unmanned facility, so it itself won't generate any daily traffic. It might require maintenance visits, maybe 2-3 times a year, but the traffic demand of this thing is extremely negligible. There will be construction. During the construction, the traffic management will be worked out at that time, and a traffic management plan will be undertaken by the construction company to make sure that disruption is minimized. So I think, and I suppose the only other thing I should talk about is visual, because no doubt that's something. Oh, actually, you mentioned that there was a school and a coffee shop. So we do take points of interest to make sure that it is compliant at these points of interest. We can't exactly tell you the points of interest because of confidentiality reasons. People generally don't like to make it public knowledge. However, we do take those points to make sure that at the specifically sensitive points, we are well below our exposure, the exposure limits. And I can tell you at the school, it's actually 1.18, or 1.84, sorry. So it is, what's that? My fractions aren't that good, but it is pretty well 50 times lower than what is considered safe. So yeah, I'll just address visual because no doubt that's a concern. So the facility height has been minimized as much as possible. There is a technical requirement for these things to be higher than the prevailing houses, trees, buildings, etc. So there is actually a technical need for these things to be higher than the predominant buildings. However, the height has been minimized as much as possible to ensure that the RF objectives are actually met. 25 meters was considered the minimum height that we could have the facility to meet the RF coverage objectives, which are not just the immediate area, but the surrounding residential areas, obviously the commercial areas that it's in, the pass-through traffic. So it's to service the whole area. It's not just a small base station. It's quite a large base station. So I suppose the other point is that it's visually a slimline monopole. So it doesn't have the building bulk. So it doesn't have shadowing, negligible shadowing effects. So even though it is a taller structure, the bulk of the facility is very narrow. And we've used a grey colour to try and make sure that it, grey generally tarnishes over time and also matches a lot of the existing vertical elements in the area, such as power poles, street lights, that kind of stuff. So we find that to be we find it to tarnish over time to blend with the general commercial surroundings. So yeah, I suppose that's what I would have to offer, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions, specific questions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I'll open that up now to questions from the panel. Who would like to go first?
Go first, Donna, Steve Leafley. Mark, just in relation to future development, that precinct in there allows a height limit up to 11.5 metres. So over time, one could expect to see other development within that East Gosford commercial precinct. What is the issue with, say, residential development occurring up to that that height limit on adjoining sites with the EME issue?
Yeah, so there is none. I actually had that. I had a look into this. So there is modelling done on the facility. So essentially where the antennas are, and I suppose that's the point, is that there's no EME from the base station itself. It's from the antennas, so it's higher up. So we model where the EME plumes are, which would encroach on that 100% of the Arpanza limit, and it is well above the 11.5 meters, being a 25 meter facility. So the antennas are sitting at what, 23.5 and 20. So the area of EME exclusion is sitting up around that area, so it doesn't affect the 11.5 building height limit.
How far above that? How far above the is that plume above the 11.5 metre height limit?
I believe, based on currently, it's about 5 meters currently.
Okay, so if someone wanted to do a development on the adjoining properties up to 11.5 metres, you guys wouldn't have an issue with that?
No, there'd be no objection from Telstra, no.
Thank you.
Stephen, do you have any other questions?
No, that's all I had.
Okay. Tony, what about you? Can't hear you. Need to unmute.
There are a couple of issues that we discussed on site. One of them is the loss of the car parking space. The facility appears to be approximately 3.5 metres wide. If you come out that far, it looks like it's going to encroach on one of the car parking spaces. Is that the case?
Yeah, so it's very informal car parking back there at the moment. Even though the approval does delineate car parking spaces, it generally seems like it's pretty informal. Look, it does come out 3.5 meters, so it will encroach. When we were out there was actually table and chairs set up there. So what I would imagine happening is people would just park up against the bollards of the facility, which is roughly where they were parking there anyway, when we were out at site.
There's no plan to indicate the layout of the car park area.
Pardon?
There's no plan to show the layout of the car park area.
Yeah, I suppose that's because it was that's because it wasn't really line marked at the time. There's
a little bit of faint line marking, and the actual one of the line marking, some line marking comes up in your detail drawing, but there's no indication of where the cars would park. I'm assuming the only way you can park in there is at 45 degrees.
Yeah, so I think everyone parks in at an angle, and really what I think is that they would just park at that same angle, 45-degree angle, right up to the facility itself. So yeah, I mean, as I said, it does, and as you said, it does encroach about 3.5 meters into the car parking area. When we were there, it wasn't actually used for car parking anyway. However, what I can see happening is people just parking up against the facility itself. So I'm not sure that there would be a net loss. And I noticed that there was bins and whatnot parked on the over some car parking as well.
So
Your
the
application
planner-
says that there will not be a net loss, just to follow up on this issue of parking, but it appears to be physically impossible for that to be true based on the current configuration. There are markings on the ground that you can see, and if people have got to come out 3 meters from that bottom wall to park, I'm not sure how anyone's going to park opposite them.
So I think, yeah, so I think the cabinets are actually on a raised platform. So I think I would have to, but I think the idea is that they would just come up and park against it. But I can go back and double check that, because potentially it would, yeah, physically it would have to.
Just from a
Physically,
practical
it would
point
have
of
to
view,
what?
though, Mark, if you've got someone parking in the last space, then no one has to go past them. But it's either 45 or 60 degree angle parking, and so on either side of a centre aisle. So if the last person coming into where the facility is going to hang out by a few metres, that would make it very difficult for the last person turning to the right to park in that space. I don't believe that there will be a nil loss of car parking. I think you will lose a car parking space.
Yeah, okay, that could potentially be right, because you're right. If somebody was to like back in, their tail would stick out further than the rest of them.
Yes.
Mm.
Oh, and while I was there, I noticed a drainage pit. Has anyone done any design work on how that's going to be dealt with?
Yeah. So that's been incorporated into the design. So it's just worked around. So that will stay where it is.
Okay.
We worked around with the design. I suppose just on the car parking, all I'd suggest also is that there appears to be ample car parking around the site. So there's a big car park over the other side of the street. There's a lot of on-street car parking.
Okay, that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Tony. Greg, what about you? Greg, we can't hear you. Andrew, do we have any word from Greg about what's happening there?
No, just to confirm that he was connected by phone. Unmuted, so we should have been able to hear him, but couldn't hear.
Okay.
It appears now that he's ended his phone call with the meeting. So just see if he dials back in. Hopefully he will dial back in very shortly.
Yes. Yep, he's got a phone up to his ear. I can see his picture. I just can't hear him.
Yeah, just confirming Greg's dialed back in, so should be here any minute. Can you hear me?
Yes, Greg.
Can you?
Sorry about all this. I don't know. Mr. Kavanagh, I just wanted, you talked about the safe level, it's 5.1% for the EME levels. Is that the, with co-location in the future, if it was full capacity with all of these things hooked up to it, what would the level be with at a total capacity? Is that what 5% 5.1 is, or are you just talking about the current application?
So yeah, I am talking about the current application because we can't, I suppose we can't model for something that might or might not happen. What I would say is that it is the same process that's done if there was an upgrade to the site, there would be another updated EME model done, updated environmental EME report done to make sure that the level is still very much within the safe levels.
So you're suggesting that if an application comes in to redo the one next door for Vodafone or something else, and we stay under the legislation and all of the best practices, go and talk to Telstra and put it on, see if you can put it onto their tower, they'd have to do an application, do the assessment to see what impact it has on the adjoining properties. Is that correct?
Sorry, just repeat that question.
So if an application came in to put an application in to do another tower down the street or across the road or whatever, and they said, no, you've got to go onto the Telstra tower here. That's what we're going to look at. They'd put an application and do the modelling to see if that site was suitable for further upgrades. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so any co-location or upgrade to existing needs to redo all of the EME modelling.
So the 5 metres you suggested before about potential expansion upwards, if that came in before that was done, that would sterilise future development, would it?
No. Well, I don't think so, because I don't think you'd ever get a situation where antennas would be down so low because it wouldn't comply with your EME regulations.
Okay, all right.
So what I'm getting at is that if somebody tried to co-locate and put antennas at 15 meters, well then that's more than likely going to fail the EME tests.
Okay, so potentially there's no potential for further expansion of this facility, maybe.
It depends on where the future antennas are located. Yeah, I mean, they do try and co-locate where possible. So they do try and help each other out where possible. But as I said, it's got to make sure it's still got to be with the EME guidelines. And yeah, it definitely needs to make sure that it's not limiting future potential development.
Okay, the objector raised the question of staff and people living there in excess of 10 hours a day. You can actually give us your guarantee that these impacts and the cumulative impacts of the adjoining Vodafone will have absolutely no impacts at all.
Yeah, so the scientific evidence and the modelling done is based on people standing there 100% of the day and night.
When you were asked a question before about the cumulative impacts of this and the Vodafone, you said you believed that was the truth. Do you know, or do you just believe? We need to be satisfied that both these facilities together, the cumulative impacts, don't have an impact on people working, visiting, shops plus the residents at the back. Can you guarantee that?
Yeah, based on the EME report done, which is scientific evidence, yes, cumulatively compliant.
For both facilities?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. No further question.
Anybody else from the panel have any further questions or comments?
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question to staff if I could.
Greg,
Chair?
can I just deal with Mr. Kavanagh, and then we can move on to questions?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, sure.
Okay, Mark, my issues were around parking and the apparent impossibility of retaining all the spots on the site, and also on the questions of electromagnetic stuff. I'm interested to know the testing that you've done in this particular site and the levels that you've predicted for surrounding uses. Is that typical of these sites? Is this about the same in terms of EME as any other similar facility somewhere else that's already operational?
Yeah, it's very typical.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to questions for staff, and I think you were first, Greg, weren't you?
Yeah, is Mr. McCourt there? Who is staff? I just want to ask a simple question about the Mr. Bell raised the issue that there was absolutely no consultation on this. Was this development application advertised, and how long was it advertised?
Yes, yeah, it was. In accordance with the DCP.
Yep. So it was advertised between the 29th of the 1st and the 12th of the 2nd, is that correct?
If that's, yeah, I just can't recall offhand, but that sounds right.
Okay, so was there any other, it just seemed strange that it was raised that there was no consultation. So there was formal advertising done under the development control plan for this application, which is
That's
similar
correct.
to other DAs through ADCOS. Okay,
That's correct.
thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just on that issue,
No further.
so who exactly was notified?
The owner would have been notified of the property.
Yep.
And neighbours as well?
Joining
All owners.
Yeah. Adjoining.
Well, within a radius of the site.
What's the radius of the site? Who was notified?
Yeah, I can't recall just offhand, but there's usually a set area that is subject to notification.
I think Andrew might be speaking, but we can't hear you, Andrew.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes, vastly.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I muted my own microphone. It's in Council's DCP. The Development Control Plan states that notification must be undertaken to owners of all adjacent and adjoining properties. So that's standard clause in the DCP. It is practice for things like this that would then be a bit of a consultation wider than that, because obviously this type of application would potentially have a wider impact. So I could say with certainty that the application would have been notified to all those owners of land that are either adjoining or adjacent the property, including those on the opposite sides of the road. I could not tell you with certainty exactly how far any further went, but the DCP requires adjoining and adjacent properties.
Is that just the owners or the occupiers as well?
So the policy says owners, and this is actually one of the issues that was raised by one of the objectors in letters to local MPs, was in relation to how come tenants don't get notified. And of course, the reason for that is that council does not hold any data on leasees or tenants of properties and who are occupying properties. What we do have is the owner's details for purpose of issuing rates. So it's standard practice to issue them to the owners of the properties because that's the only details we have.
How many submissions were made during the notification period, Brian?
It's 22 in the report, I think.
Yeah, there were 22 submissions during the notification period. And then I note to the panel that when we notify, of course, part of our practice is once something is referred to the local planning panel to let all of those people that made objections know that the matter is going before the local planning panel, and so submissions which I've provided to the panel.
Yep, I acknowledge receipt of those additional submissions. There were 6 of them, and
Six, yeah.
I've read those as well. Thank you.
And of course, Mr. Bell's request to speak, of course, as well.
Yes.
Is it notified in any other ways other than, so I assume by mail, it's mailed out to adjoining owners. Is there any other means by which the application is notified or exhibited, like electronic council's website or something?
Yeah, so there's a couple of other things. So every application and all details go onto council's website, and that is the main portal where objectors or neighbours, or indeed applicants or any member of the public can access all of the information. So that's obviously something that's undertaken. We also have the practice of notifying in the local newspaper. And we used to use the Express Advocate, but for those that have followed the media will know that the Express Advocate has stopped being printed, so we've recently switched to a publication called Coast Community News, which publish a number of papers on the coast. So advertising in local print media as well forms part of that process.
Maybe this might have been a more appropriate issue with Mr. Kavanagh, if he's still there, if I could ask. Just in relation to the consultation under the guideline, it seems from the statement of environmental effects that they were relying on the 2014 consultation.
I would have to double check that. I believe that no additional consultation beyond that which council did was this current application, but I would need to double check that.
What's required by the guideline, Mr. Kavanagh?
So for a DA, there is none because it is considered that the council notification of the DA is sufficient consultation. There are instances where a DA is not required for telecommunications facilities, and that's where the guidelines come into it. And generally speaking, it's notification of surrounding residents and specifically interested and affected parties.
I can just also confirm for the panel, I've just had a staff member let me know that the application was advertised in the Local Express Advocate and published on Wednesday, the 29th of January. So that publication in the Local Express Advocate was undertaken as well.
Thank you. Any additional questions for anybody?
I guess through the chair, I think the fact that we had Mr. Bell speaking, and he occupies an adjoining property, and we've got a number of other submissions. I think council really should be looking at their consultation notification policy too. I know a lot of councils do notify adjoining owners and occupiers, and that's just a notification that goes to the street address. That's how you would do it to be concerned. So in council's review of its notification policy, it should look at doing that, especially in commercial areas like this where you get a lot of people leasing properties.
Okay, anything else in relation to the application before us? Before we let Mr. Bell and Mr. Kavanagh go? Okay, I'm taking that as a no from everybody.
No.
So under more normal face-to-face circumstances, we might adjourn at this point to deliberate and then come back. But we probably should move on to the public discussion of the application, the second application that we're due to consider today, which is in relation to the shipping containers at the Oval in Bateau Bay. And I suppose in the absence of any member of the public who wishes to speak on this matter, and I assume in the absence of any representative of the applicant, am I right?
That's correct. There's no registered speakers from either side.
Okay. Do any members of the panel have any questions for Cam?
All I'd like to say is we had the site inspection the other day, and I raised the issue of the ancillary development. I note the supplementary information that Mr. Roach has provided, and thank you for that. That's addressed the issue I had with that, and I think that matter's been adequately dealt with now.
Thank you, Stephen. Greg or Tony, any questions on this matter before we close the public meeting and adjourn to deliberate?
Yeah, again, I raised the issue on inspections, whether, under the Local Government Act, because it was a council-owned land, what was the land classification? Because depending on that categorisation, etc., and classification, different issues involved. I think we were advised it was community land on the day, but it's since been advised, thanks to the staff, that the land is operational. So, it won't require the plan and management issues. So, as far as I'm concerned, I have no further issues with that.
Thank you, Greg. Tony? Unmute.
I'll be just asking that the time period for the consent be extended when we consider the application.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that deals with hearing from members of the public and representatives of applicants. We will now adjourn to deliberate on the applications before us. Andrew, I believe that what we do is we move into some sort of breakout group that somebody from council has set up. Here it is. Okay, so we'll go off and do that. And as I said at the beginning, what we might normally do would be return to the room to provide the determination under these technologically challenged and health challenged pandemic circumstances. That's probably not going to happen. But what we'll do is put the result up on the council's website as soon as we can. So let's all who are needed in the breakout room, let's join the breakout room. And thank you everybody for this part of the very first meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. Thank you.
Hello, I'm on hold.